Mystery, fear, and enigma encompass the seafaring ghost ships or phantom ships' tales that have been passed around throughout centuries by sailors, anglers, and others. These mysterious ships are fantasied as spectral phantasms that materialize in the middle of the sea and disappear quickly, apparently a bad omen. In addition, abandoned ships, which are found adrift and left desolated under fearsome and cryptic circumstances, are included in this video. Albeit these all being marine legends and sometimes lacking authenticity, some of these haunted ships continue to provoke speculation and fearful anticipation. Number 10. The Calueche. Some say the Calueche is a living being, luring sailors and fishermen aboard with its ghostly music and enslaving them for all eternity. Others say it is a vessel crewed by those who have drowned at sea, brought to the ship by water spirits to live again. Still others claim that the Calueche is crewed by warlocks who make magical pacts with certain traders, offering them prosperity in exchange for dark favors and promises. Because of this last version, when a chilote gets rich quickly, it may be whispered that they have made a pact with the crew of the Calueche. Those who see or hear the Calueche but resist its call are turned into marine animals, such as seals or sea lions. According to legend, the Calueche is a large ghost ship sailing the seas around Calueche at night, and it is a living, sentient being who is conscious. The possessed vessel appears as a beautiful and bright sailing ship, always full of lights and with the sounds of a party on board, but quickly disappears again, or hiding navigating underwater. The myths claim it is crewed by the drowned, who are brought to the ship by three chilote mythological figures, two sisters, the Sirena Chilota, a type of mermaid, and the Pincoya and their brother, the Pincoy. Once aboard, the dead can resume an existence as if they were alive again. In the folklore of Chiloe, also say that the evil Brujo Chilote, a type of sorcerer or a warlock, likes to visit the party, which they can reach by summoning up magical Caballo Marino Chilote, a mythical creature similar to a water horse. Her crew would also be composed of fishermen and sailors who were kidnapped to serve and work as human slaves, which are transformed into a creature very similar to a in Vunche and Alistair Reynolds' Chasm City. Calueche is the name given to a ship trailing behind a flotilla of colony ships that is not supposed to be there and never responds to communication attempts. When the protagonist takes a shuttle to visit the ghost ship, he discovers that it is really a spacefaring alien creature that has assumed the appearance of one of the flotilla ships and is trying to hide amongst them from its own enemy. Number 9. SS Valencia. The SS Valencia is well known for two hair-raising reasons: the grueling 40 hours it took to sink it and the ghost stories that have emerged around it in the century since. Sailing from San Francisco, California to Victoria in January 1906, the ship hit some bad weather and veered off course. Lost in the fog, the captain and crew overshot Victoria and soon found themselves in a notoriously treacherous section of the coastline, the graveyard of the Pacific. She crashed on the rocks and amazingly was only 100 meters away from land, said Brittany Viss, Associate Director of the Maritime Museum of BC. But despite being so close to safety, very few would survive. That day, giant waves crashed over the Valencia and those on board were immediately thrown into a panic. Lifeboats were lowered half full and many capsized before they even hit the ocean, leaving those who were in them to flounder in the icy water off the west coast of Vancouver Island. For 40 hours, chaos ensued as crew and passengers attempted to escape and rescuers tried to reach them. Finally, the Valencia surrendered to its fate and sunk below the surface. Of the nearly 200 people on board, only 37 survived. Those who survived somehow miraculously managed to swim and grab a hold of land and not get bashed into the rocks, Viss said. But when they finally reached the shore, the exhausted survivors were met with nothing but bush. A few others managed to board lifeboats before the ship went down and were picked up by rescue vessels nearby. It is because of this the Canadian government commissioned the Dominion life-saving trail, known as the West Coast Trail today, and the Pachena Point Lighthouse. It hoped a trail would help rescuers reach stranded vessels and a lighthouse would warn approaching ships of the jagged coastline. The story of the Valencia shipwreck didn't end there, though. As early as 1910, there are records of mariners seeing a ghost ship that would follow them up the coastline until it reached the site of the shipwreck, where it would jump up and crash down under the waves, disappearing. Number 8. Ourang Medan. The SS Ourang Medan, a Dutch vessel, was passing through the Strait of Malacca when it ran afoul of a mysterious tragedy. Nearby ships reported receiving a horrifying distress call. All officers, including captain, dead, lying in chart room and on bridge, probably whole crew dead, it stated. Then there was an unintelligible frenzy of Morse code. The radio operator had the final word, "I die." Rescuers who boarded the vessel, it said, found the stricken ship just as described. The crew was indeed dead, their bodies strewn across the decks. Not only that, but they were found teeth bared, with their upturned faces to the sun, staring, as if in fear. Even the ship's dog was dead, frozen in this ghastly state, mid-growl at an assailant or horror unknown. That's just the start of the mystery of the Ourang Medan. Reports go on to suggest that shortly after the ship was boarded, a fire broke out in its bowels, forcing those who had arrived to this grisly tableau to evacuate. Shortly after they did, the ship exploded with such force that it was lifted out of the ocean, before quickly sinking without a trace. Naturally, this leaves us with not one but two incredible mysteries to ponder. What caused the mass demise of the Ourang Medan's crew, and what caused the subsequent explosion? We're getting ahead of ourselves, though, because there's one more thing to consider. Officially, the ship may never have existed. This famous story leads to all kinds of dead ends. Most notably, there's no mention of the SS Ourang Medan's registration in Lloyd's shipping registers, nor has any official recording of the bizarre incident on board been discovered. The reason the precise date of the event has been so difficult to pinpoint is that newspaper reports tell various versions of the story across a period of time, each adding and embellishing details along the way. Nevertheless, believers swear that this impossible, fantastical tale is absolutely true. It's said that the ship's registry wasn't found because it was actually registered in Sumatra. The vessel's name translates to man from Medan, Medan being a Sumatran island. More than that, Professor Theodor Siersdorfer, a German researcher who's been poring over the fascinating case for around half a century, discovered an old German publication from 1953 entitled Das Totenschiff in der Südsee, or The Death Ship in the South Seas. This little booklet, courtesy of now deceased scholar Otto Mielke, is believed by some to offer evidence that the ship was real, as was its tragic fate. It offers an intriguing possibility as to the cause of the explosion that sent the Ourang Medan to the depths. Das Totenschiff in der Südsee suggests that potassium cyanide and nitroglycerin were stored in the ship's hold. If so, this could certainly explain the vessel's sudden accidental destruction, as well as the nebulous nature of any records connected to the ship and the incident. In the tense international climate at the close of World War II, these were super-sensitive materials to be transporting and would spark quite an incident should they be used carelessly. Perhaps the details of the SS Ourang Medan are so difficult to find because somebody wants them to be, all this time later. As for the unfortunate crew, various possibilities arise. A pirate attack certainly wouldn't be out of the question, but most accounts claim that the bodies were largely unwounded. The circumstances hint towards a release of dangerous gases, another volatile and controversial yet familiar cargo in the international climate. The possibility of a supernatural or otherworldly incident has been raised, and that's impossible to verify. There are so many loose ends here, but one thing is for certain. The case is one of the most fascinating in nautical history, and much like Jack the Ripper's identity and countless other unsolved mysteries, it's precisely impossible nature that continues to capture our imaginations. Number 7. Carrol A. Deering. Built by the G.G. Deering Company of Bath, Maine, and launched in 1919, the ship was the last the company would build, and was named for the son of the owner. Although well into the age of steamships, large sailing ships like the Deering were more economical for coastal trade, and the legs of its ill-fated 1921 journey began August of 1920 in Norfolk, where it picked up a load of coal for delivery to Rio de Janeiro. Soon after leaving port, the ship's master, Captain Merritt, becomes ill. The ship docked in Lewis, Delaware, where it is determined he is too sick to continue. His son and first mate, S.E. Merritt, stays with his father in Delaware. Charles Wormel, a well-respected ship's master with years of experience, is then hired as captain, and then Charles McClellan is hired as first mate. The ship continues to Rio, where it unloads its cargo, and the crew of 11 goes ashore. While ashore, Captain Wormel sees an old friend, a Captain Goodwin, and in the course of conversation, tells him he doesn't trust his first mate, believing he is a troublemaker. Wormel's concerns seem well-founded. When the Deering puts into Barbados for supplies and shore leave in early January, First Mate McClellan gets drunk and is thrown in jail. Wormel bails him out, but witnesses describe an argument that takes place later in which McClellan threatens the captain's life. On January 9th, the ship leaves Barbados and is not seen again until the 29th, when the crew hails lightship keeper Captain Jacobson aboard the Cape Lookout lightship, telling him the ship had lost its anchors in a gale and to notify the Deering Company, owner of the ship. The lightship's radio is out, so Jacobson is unable to contact anyone immediately. He does report in his ship's log, though. 5-mast schooner Carrol A. Deering, in passing bound north, reported having lost both anchors and chains off Frying Pan Shoal, asking to be reported, but ship's wireless out of commission. Was unable to get in touch with passing vessels. Testimony taken later from Jacobson seemed to be an indication that something was not quite right on the Deering. According to what he told investigators, at the time the ship hailed him, the entire crew seemed to be gathered on the foredeck. Perhaps most significantly, the man he spoke to, based on Jack Bosun's experience, neither spoke nor acted like an officer. 2 days later, the Carrol A. Deering was found abandoned on Diamond Shoals. The Coast Guard salvage crew that boarded the ship found additional mysteries beyond the pristine shape of the vessel. A map indicating daily positions of the ship showed Captain Wormel's distinctive handwriting until January 23rd. After that date, someone else was recording the positions. Before abandoning the ship, the crew did take the time to place red warning lights on the masts, indicating the ship was derelict or out of control. The investigation was unable to resolve what happened. Most mariners at the time felt mutiny was the most likely cause, although no sign of the lifeboats nor any member of the crew has ever been accounted for. Other possibilities included piracy at the hands of Bolshevik-inspired American communists and rum runners, since this was the age of prohibition. Both theories have been largely discounted. As a sailing vessel, the Deering was too slow and too visible to be a rum runner. Piracy would have involved seizing the ship, and that clearly did not happen. The mystery endures, and it may never be solved. Number 6. SS Bachimo. Ships aren't meant to sink, but sometimes you have to wonder what miraculous forces kept a vessel afloat. The SS Bachimo was such a ship. For nearly 4 decades after it was abandoned, this 300-ton cargo ship sailed the Arctic without fuel or crew, until it disappeared just over 50 years ago, but some believe she is still out there drifting among the frozen icebergs. SS Bachimo was launched in 1914, originally as Ångermanälven, after one of Sweden's longest rivers, Ångerman. She was designed and built by the Swedish shipbuilders Lindholmens for a German company based in Hamburg. The vessel had a steel hull 230 feet long and was powered by a triple expansion steam engine. She was also outfitted with schooner rigging. Ångermanälven was used as a trading vessel by her German owners around the Baltic Sea, sailing between Hamburg and Sweden until the First World War began. Following the Great War, she was ceded to the British government as part of Germany's war reparations and was acquired by the Hudson's Bay Company in 1921, whereupon she was renamed Bachimo. Based in Ardrossan, Scotland, Bachimo made routine trips across the North Atlantic between her home port and Canada, visiting trading posts and collecting pelts. In 1923, Bachimo was assigned to a different route, this time in the Western Arctic, traveling between Vancouver and the Hudson's Bay Company's posts along the Yukon and Northwest Territories' northern coast. Aside from carrying cargo, Bachimo occasionally took passengers, but since she wasn't legally allowed to carry people, these ocean travelers were listed as part of the crew and were required to work on the ship in exchange for a room and a trip back home. In late September 1931, on her way back to Vancouver, The Bachimo ran into a surprise blizzard near Point Barrow on Alaska's northern coast, where she became trapped in pack ice. It became apparent that the crew will have to overwinter in the Arctic. But since Bachimo couldn't be heated all winter long, the crew decided to leave the ship and set up camp near the town of Barrow, just over half a mile away. Throughout the month of October and most of November, some men would return to the ship every day to clear away ice from the ship's rudder and other critical piece of equipment. On the 24th of November, a powerful blizzard struck, and when it cleared, the men found the Bachimo gone. The captain and crew assumed the vessel had sunk, but they soon received word that an Inuk hunter had spotted the Bachimo roughly 72 kilometers south of their encampment. The crewmen tracked the ship down, but deciding she was unlikely to survive the winter, they removed the most valuable furs from the hold and abandoned the ship for the last time. Captain Cornwell and the remaining crew flew back to Vancouver, and the company wrote off the vessel and the negligible cargo it held as a loss. Shortly thereafter, the Bachimo was spotted about 480 kilometers to the east of where she was last spotted. The following year, she was seen again floating near the shores of Alaska. In the decades that followed, numerous people sighted the Bachimo all around the Arctic, peacefully adrift in the frigid waters. Many times she was boarded by explorers or crews of passing ships, but each time she eluded capture. Once, a group of Alaska natives boarded her and were trapped aboard for 10 days by a freak storm. In 1969, 38 years after she was abandoned, she was found trapped in an ice pack in Beaufort Sea between Point Barrow and Icy Cape, off the northwestern Alaskan coast. That was the last recorded sighting of Bachimo. Nearly 4 decades later, in 2006, the Alaskan government began work on a project to find Bachimo, as well as an estimated 4,000 ships that had disappeared along the coast of Alaska. The search yielded nothing. Assuming that the Bachimo had sunk shortly after her last sighting, it still makes her one of the longest sailing ghost ships in the world. Ships rarely survive for so long unmanned, especially among the crushing ice packs. It's more than likely that the once unsinkable ghost ship now lies somewhere in the cold, muddy bottom of the Arctic Ocean. Number 5. Octavious. The story opens in 1761 with the Octavious docked in the port of London to take on a cargo destined for China. This majestic sailing ship left port with a full crew, the skipper, and his wife and son. They arrived safely in China and unloaded their cargo. They headed back to sea once she was loaded with goods destined for British shores, but as the weather was unusually warm, the captain decided to sail home via the Northwest Passage, a voyage that at the time had not been accomplished. This was the last that anyone heard of the vessel, her crew, or her cargo. Octavius was declared lost. On October 11, 1775, the whaling ship Herald was working the frigid waters off Greenland when it spotted a sailing ship. On nearing the ship, the crew saw that the ship was weather-beaten. The sails were tattered and torn and hanging limply on the masts. The captain of the Herald ordered a boarding party to search the vessel, which they had determined was the Octavius. The boarding party arrived on deck to find it deserted. They broke open the ship's hatch and scrambled down the ladder into the semi-darkness below, where a terrifying sight met their eyes. They found the entire 28-man crew frozen to death in their quarters. In the captain's cabin, they found the captain seated at his desk, pen in hand, with the ship's logbook open on the desk in front of him. The inkwell and other everyday items were still in their place on the desk. Turning around, they saw a woman wrapped in a blanket on the bunk, frozen to death, along with the body of a young boy. The boarding party was terrified. Grabbing the ship's log, they fled from the Octavius. In their mad flight, they lost the middle pages of the logbook that were frozen solid and came loose from the book binding. They arrived back on the Herald with just the first and last pages of the logbook, which were enough for the master of the Herald to determine at least a part of the story of the voyage. The captain of the Octavius had tried to navigate the Northwest Passage, but his ship had become imprisoned in the ice of the Arctic, and the entire crew had perished. The ship's last recorded position was 75 N160W, which placed the Octavius 250 miles north of Barrow, Alaska. As the Octavius had been found off the coast of Greenland, it must have broken loose from the ice at some stage and completed its voyage through the passage to come out on the other side, where it met the Herald. The crew of the Herald were frightened of the Octavious and feared that it was cursed, so they simply left it adrift. To this day, it has never been sighted again. Author David Meyer has tried to track down the story of the Octavius. In his blog, he considers the idea that the Octavius could be the same ship as the Gloriana, which was boarded in 1775 by the captain of the Try Again, John Warrens. He recorded that he found a frozen crew that had been dead for 13 years, and the date of the discovery was spookily similar, November 11th, 1762. Are these tales of the same vessel? In the Gloriana story, there is no mention of the Northwest Passage, which remains even today a place of mystery and magic, but that adds just that little bit of spice to the tale of Octavius. Number 4. MV Joyita. According to a contemporaneous report from Life magazine, via Google Books, the MV Joyita had set sail from Apia, a port in western Samoa east of Fiji, bound for the Tokelau Islands. The route would take the boat 290 miles across the Pacific, though with the 69-foot boat captained by respected seaman Thomas Henry Dusty Miller, the 15 crew members and 9 passengers on board believed they were in capable hands. So it was a great concern when the vessel, which had set off from Samoa on October 3rd, 1995, was reported missing 3 days later, after failing to arrive at its destination. The journey should have taken 48 hours at most, via Cracked, while the vessel was considered to be virtually unsinkable due to its highly buoyant design. It was, after all, a pleasure craft. The Joyita was finally discovered 100,000 square mile search of the Pacific, the vessel having drifted almost 1,000 miles off course. According to Cracked, the recovery team encountered a disturbing scene. The boat floating at an angle in the water, its windows broken, the bridge obliterated, as though it had been struck by some huge object. The lights were on, but the clocks were stopped, while the radio was tuned to the international distress signal, evidence that the inhabitants knew they were in trouble and had called for help that never came. All 3 lifeboats were missing, while a doctor's bag was found on deck containing a number of bloody bandages, proving that passengers had suffered injuries while still on board. On being towed back to Samoa, the vessel was shown to have been in a state of incredible disrepair, which investigators claimed must have been the case even before the ship departed, bringing Dusty Miller's sense of responsibility into question. Theories involving mutiny, pirate attack, and a panicked escape from the boat, which was believed to have flooded in its lower decks without sinking, have all been forwarded as explanations for why the Joyita was abandoned, while some contemporaneous news stories claimed Japanese involvement, per the same source. But to this day, none has been confirmed, and no trace of its passengers has ever been found. Number 3. Lady Lovibond. On February 13th, 1748, a 3-mast schooner called the Lady Lovibond left port for a leisurely sail along the Thames River near Kent, England, with the final destination of Oporto, Portugal. The captain, Simon Reed, had just been married and brought his new wife Annetta with him for a honeymoon voyage. The crew were below decks, celebrating with the new bride and groom, except for the boatswain and first mate, John Rivers. Although Rivers had served his captain as best man at the wedding, he was also in love with the beautiful bride. The more he thought of her, the more jealous he became until finally, unable to bear his anger any longer, he decided to take action. The ship was passing a notorious stretch of the English Channel called the Goodwin Sands. The Goodwin Sands is a 9-mile stretch between Kingsdown, Kent and Pegwell Bay, and is still one of the most dangerous passages of the English Channel. The conditions change so quickly it can be observed as the tides change, and sediment moves around as the water passes through the Straits of Dover. Some believe it was once an island, but there has been no geological evidence to support this theory. During low tide, as much as 1/10 of the total area can be exposed, and one can walk on the sediment. There have even been cricket matches played on the Goodwin Sands. Over 1,000 wrecks have been recorded in this area since 1298. And the area has become a virtual ship's graveyard. Frequently, when ships attempt to sail through at high tide, the sediment quickly moves about and sucks the ship down into the sands with the stern only partially supported. This leads to the ship's back being broken and unable to sail once the tide comes back in. The entire ship is engulfed with great loss of life. Two specific shipwrecks can be cited at low tide: the Northeastern Victory and the Ourang Victory, two American cargo ships that were wrecked in 1946. As the Lady Lovibond passed through the area, rivers attacked the bosun and took over the ship. He intentionally steered the ship onto the Goodwin Sands, destroying the ship and killing everyone aboard. Exactly 50 years to the day after the Lady Lovibond was destroyed, the captain of the ship, Edenbridge, recorded in his log that he had almost collided with a schooner with 3 masts. He reported sounds of a celebration coming from the ship as it broke up. A rescue team was dispatched, but could find no sign of the ship or its passengers. Another 50 years passed, and again on the 13th of February, locals saw a 3-masted schooner head toward the sands. Again, no evidence of wreckage was found. In 1848, the same ship was reported to have been seen breaking up in the very same area with no shipwreck in sight. The last report was filed in 1948 by Captain Bull Presick. He was convinced he saw an actual ship that was described as the Lady Lovibond, but was surrounded by a green glow as it entered the sands. The folk tales of the ghost ship created so much attention that many curious onlookers made their way to the sands in 1998 to catch a glimpse of the legendary ship, but were all disappointed when no ship appeared. Were the tales made up to entertain the gullible, or were the reports made by people who actually believed they saw the Lady Lovibond on its way to its watery grave every 50 years? Researchers George Behe and Michael Goss believe the stories were a Valentine's Day invention and were simply legends conceived to entertain. We have only 33 years to wait before we can be sure. Number 2. Mary Celeste. British ship DI Gracia found the Mary Celeste on the 4th of December 1872 near the Strait of Gibraltar. It was weird as the latter had left New York 8 days before the DI Gracia and should have reached its destination, Genoa, Italy, by now. However, the boarding party from the British vessel discovered that below deck, things looked pretty standard with no signs of any attack. Probably the most famous real-life ghost ship story embraces the Mary Celeste, found adrift in the Atlantic Ocean in 1872 in a completely unharmed condition with all its sails still up, the crew's personal belongings intact, and a cargo hold of over 1,500 alcohol barrels untouched. The only things missing were the lifeboat, the captain's logbook, and most importantly, the whole crew. Since pirate attacks could not be held responsible for such a phenomenon, theories of crew mutiny, waterspout killing, and consumption of poisonous food leading to madness came into being. However, the most reasonable explanation could be a storm or technical issue, compelling the crew to immediately abandon the ship in the lifeboat and die later at sea. Apart from these, the mystery of this haunted ship surrounds by ghosts and even sea monsters and alien abduction theories. Captain Morehouse of DI Gracia knew Captain Briggs of Celeste to be a capable sailor, leading to more suspicions about what actually happened. However, the poor fate of Mary Celeste and its souls has been immortalized in Arthur Conan Doyle's short story written in 1884, J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement. Number 1. The Flying Dutchman. The Flying Dutchman was a part of the Dutch East India Company's fleet of ships, sailing between the Netherlands and the East Indies, carrying silks, spices, dyes, and other exotic items from Asia to Europe. The ship was caught in a storm while returning to Amsterdam. The much-recounted folklore shrouding the vessel is for the man who skippered the ghost ship. Accounts vary about the name of the skipper of the Flying Dutchman. According to some, the captain was one Hendrik van der Decken, whose deep contemplation about the plight of his seamen and resultant oblivion to the approaching storm on the coast of the Cape led to the ship being destroyed. Captain van der Decken was working for the Dutch East India Company during the early 17th century and was one of 2 men thought to have captained the Flying Dutchman. During one of his voyages to Amsterdam, Captain van der Decken thought of establishing a settlement near the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa as a respite from the rough waters. As the vessel started to round the Cape, a terrible storm hit, putting the ship in danger of capsizing. Though sailors argued Captain to turn around, he ordered his crew to go ahead. The anecdote also iterated the captain's utterance to bring the vessel around the Cape, even if it meant to sail until doomsday. According to mythology, this angered the gods, who punished his soul by trapping him in the ship for eternity. In other versions, the devil overheard him and condemned him to sail forever in his boat. However, the devil gave him a way out to redeem himself through the love of a faithful woman. Hence, every 7 years, the captain is allowed to come to land to search for his one true love and find salvation through her. Another story suggested a fight between the captain and the rebel group over the captain's decision, which eventually ended in the murder of the rebel leader. As the rebel leader's body hit the water, the vessel spoke to the captain about his decision to press on, and the captain replied that he would be attempting to reach his destination till the Day of Judgment. This incident led to the fate of the Flying Dutchman to sail the oceans for eternity with a ghostly crew of dead men. In an alternate folklore relation, the captain of the vessel is said to be one whose onboard activities were satanic and whose pride, when encountered a storm in the Cape, led to the ship being mercilessly tossed into its eye instead of turning back. According to the folklore rendition, the vessel was cursed to sail the oceans without ever making a port or harbor.
Thank you guys so much for watching. What do you think about this story? Leave us a comment to let us know. But before you go, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more chilling, gruesome stories like this. Hope to see you again.